on. You're on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sundays with Lenin. And I'm your host, Esha. Today, we have Brook Hines from the Progressive News Network, and there's a lot of exciting things to talk about. And afterwards, I guess I want to talk a little bit about just everything and answer your questions. So we should also figure out, like, there's so much disinformation in the news, but most of it is so easy to figure out once like any normal human being just kind of goes in and reads the pieces. But the quantity of disinformation makes it almost impossible. So we should brainstorm on what can we do to, like, just get basics, or get people to be just like questioning the basics of what they hear all the time. And with that, we're gonna read two good Lenin pieces, one on unity, and I forgot what the other one was on, but what was the other one on?
On the marketplace.
Oh, on the constitutional marketplace. That's a good one. Liberals are always under the illusion that they live in a constitutional system. And obviously it's not, because the president, for example, can drone strike anyone he wants, and it's not really a constitutional system. It's mostly a constitutional illusion. And so we'll compare what the constitution from Tsarist Russia looked like to our own constitution. And yeah, you're not going to be happy about it. With that, we'll be back at the end for questions, comments, gossip, etc. Welcome to another episode of Sundays with Lenin. The reason why we have this show is because the left has been losing in America since forever. And the way most mainstream publications, most mainstream media have opinions or talk about situations, it ends up like misdirecting the energy and people don't know what to do. So we kind of want to learn what is to be done. And for that, we might as well learn from the best, and that is Lenin. Today, we have Brook Hines from Florida. She is the host of Progressive News Network. It's one of the best online radio shows. And she has been working with leftist candidates for probably before I was born. Right?
Well, I came from corporate, actually. I just started doing political stuff around 2011, 2012. Okay.
So it was definitely not before I was born, but she has a lot of experience, is what I was trying to say. So you live in Florida. Like, how does it feel to be leftist in Florida?
Well, I am a fourth generation Florida leftist, and I come from a long line of people who have been surrounded by the Floridian non-left, I guess you could say. So we've got a lot of experience with it. My parents, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were around when Florida was actually being built up, like when the resorts were being built up. My grandfather was a pharmacist, and during Prohibition, you could prescribe alcohol for whatever, for a cure. So people came down to Florida. Flagler built all of these resorts for people to take the cure, which was actually just getting drunk, which my Irish grandfather was very much in favor.
Wow. I didn't realize that. And I guess Florida's very strange in that there are a lot of people who are struggling, but they can't get their voice heard at all. Like, the way there's both extremes is very strange, right?
Yeah, well, so we have a lot of military here. We're a lot like California and a lot like Southern California in the way the military is part of the culture here. And I think that there's some misunderstandings, or people don't understand very well how to talk to military and ex-military people, there's an assumption that they're always going to be conservative, and that's really not the case.
No.
Oftentimes, they're way more liberal about or progressive about foreign policy and war and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, like I've noticed that ex-veterans, everyone that I've met, who they tend to be super left because they've seen what they've done, or what was they're like, oh my God, I got sent to Iraq to God knows why. And they're like, okay. And so they're very cognizant about these things. And so, yeah, I've had very rarely on a one-to-one basis, while the institution of the military is very right-wing, individuals who are ex-military tend to be they tend to be like normal people where it's like varied, but yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. And so there's and it's a party culture. So people come down here to retire, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but there's a bigger thing going on than that, where I think people who are drawn to Florida really want to come down to enjoy the sun or go fishing, or I think there's a lot of alcohol culture. There's a lot of bar culture here. And I think that's where you run into a barricade, I guess you could say, to people getting political, because they're very much, of this mind of, I'm just having fun here,
Oh, yeah. And I guess there's also the undue influence of the exile community from all over South America. And they're like the most right wing of it's like the opposite of the cream of the crop.
Right. And you have the Democratic Party here in Florida, as I've been pointing out for years now. You have the Democratic Party pandering to that particular demographic in South Florida. Exactly.
Oh, well, what I noticed is that Andrew Gilliam, he was going very well. And then suddenly he's like, okay, we need to overthrow Maduro. And it's like, what? And he he alienated a lot of people it was a shocking thing to tweet out all of a sudden, like when you're like Medicare, and then like, let's it just shocked a lot of progressives away from him because he just put it in so raw.
Yeah. And it was the day after he had gotten $4 million from SEIU and the progressive NGO groups here in Florida. So he gets that money, and the very next day he comes out and softens his Medicare for All stance to the point of it not existing, and then goes after Maduro and the government in Nicaragua out of nowhere.
Nicaragua too. Oh my God, that's even worse, because the opposition is the Contras, and we know what they've done.
Right. And look who Biden had in Florida for, Navarro was, her father was a Contra. Yep. And so she's just embraces that whole culture just full on.
In the town of Paiwas, we found a priest whose parish has been ravaged by Contra attacks. Father Jim Feltz is an American, and along the paths he travels to make his rounds, he has seen what the Contras leave in their wake.
The freedom fighters, huh? I've listened to that on the shortwave radio as I've gone from township to township, picking up bodies and seeing houses that have been burnt down. Anybody who in any way was collaborating with the Sandinistas would be a victim. Executions, lining up 3 or 4 women to be executed because their relatives were sympathizers to the Sandinistas. Unarmed women, off on remote farms, and they just kill them, slit their throat. Rape a girl of 14 years old because her father was a member of a committee, and cut off her head and put her head along the trail so that the rest of the campesinos get the idea that in no way should they be participating in some kind of government-sponsored organization.
They were literally one of the most horrific death squads. Like, there's no... So the thing about it is that even Bernie Sanders didn't do this enough. When they're like, "Oh, you supported the Sandinistas in Nicaragua," they should have just showed this video where it's like, nobody with the same mind will think that the Contras are good. But so there's no reason. This is the one issue where you don't have to capitulate. Like I mean, the larger issue maybe, but just the Contra narrow issue, you don't. But they do. Do you have any theories on why?
Can you restate that? Because I'm not exactly sure.
The Contras are, okay. So for example, I forgot about the Nicaragua part, but to me, it's like so extreme what the Contras did that there is no reason why they have to capitulate on this issue. They can sway public opinion by just saying, okay, they bayoneted babies or something. You know what I mean?
So I'm a Gen Xer, and my very first political getting involved politically was about the Contras in the 80s. And that was through the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of what's going on is we don't have the institutional memory of what happened back then. And we also have this incredible propaganda around Venezuela and Maduro and Bolivia, all of these countries that were trying to, get a hold of their resources. The propaganda is just so thick that people don't have they already don't have a sense of history, and they don't have news that's giving them the truth. And so they're just defaulting to, I'm going to support whatever our party supports.
Okay. And that's okay. Because I remember that he scared off a lot of progressives, and they're like, what's the point? And that's how I feel. Like, another thing is that there was that, like, Florida has at least 1 million people who can't vote because of.
That's a whole other thing.
Explain.
So one other thing on before we leave the South American thing, I know people who worked with the Biden campaign here in Florida, and they were freaked out, worried that it would get out that Biden supported the Boland Amendment in the 80s.
What is the Boland Amendment?
The Boland Amendment was it was a piece of it was a law that said that we couldn't support the Contras. We couldn't use tax money. And I can't imagine a piece of legislation like that passing now. So they were freaked out that this, it was very popular at the time, by the way, and it was the piece of legislation that allowed us to have the Iran-Contra hearings. It was the Boland Amendment that, gave us that legal footing for that. So already you have in 2020 and 2021, you already have these views, these foreign policy views vis-a-vis Central and South America that are far to the right of anything we would have deemed socially acceptable in the 80s.
Wow. That's scary. And
then I forgot what the other one was, because it was a really good question.
Oh, no. Well, you talked about the Boland. So you said that they couldn't. And so Biden's staff was worried that
he supported it. They were worried that people would find out that he had supported Boland.
Okay, like I said, all he could do is he could have just downloaded this and showed this over and over. Like, there's no. But yeah, that's what they don't understand is, they do understand. They don't want to deal with it. But the idea, like, people can be persuaded about everything. So the point of a campaign is not like, I don't know, being a weather vane, even like the alleged weather vane, because this is not a real weather vane, but you can actually just persuade them by saying, okay, they beheaded babies, the end.
Yeah, well, yeah. In South Florida, you're dealing with a culture that is part mafia and part militia. So the Cuban influence, the right wing Central and South American influence, especially in South Florida, is it really falls into what, when Parenti talks about the gangster state.
Yeah.
This is what he's talking about. Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Some of the things that the exiles like have done is literally like hijack planes to Cuba and just bomb stuff. Like the act of terrorism is just out there. And yeah, that's kind of what they're. Okay, so it also seems like in Florida, there's last time there were a few progressive candidates. I remember Alan Grayson, and then they came up with this like complete for lack of a better word, a hit job against him, right? Mm-hmm. Right before the election he was against the TPP. I remember that. That was the first time he came on what's his name? Ed
Schultz?
Yes, Ed Schultz's show. Like it was back in 2013. I do remember him like talking about how bad TPP was, but then like a week later, Ed Schultz was gone and
Yeah, well, so Alan Grayson went up against Obama 3 times, and TPP was one of them. Another one was Syria, and was able to get the airstrikes stopped in Syria. And then another time he went up against Obama was against the Social Security, the chain CPI. So he helped collect 4 million signatures against the lowering or cutting Social Security benefits. So these were 3 really big wins that Alan Grayson had against a Democratic Party that was trending so far to the right that rank and file Democrats weren't even recognizing it anymore. Like, what kind of Democratic Party cuts Social Security, by the way? And Biden was the executive on the Cat Food Commission, the Simpson-Bowles Commission. So, there is a chance that we are going to see change CPI again now that Biden is in office. So one of the things that happened when Alan ran for Senate in 2016, this has never happened before, never happened since. During a primary, the president and the vice president, Obama and Biden, both came down during the primary to campaign for his opponent, Patrick Murphy.
That is highly unusual. Usually the president's supposed to stay neutral.
Right.
That's usually the custom.
There was this other thing too, where Patrick Murphy's father had promised something like an insane amount of money, like $10 million to the Democratic Party nationally. It was just an insane lump sum of money. So they were really chasing after that check that he had promised.
Wow. So, oh my God. Okay. Wow. I don't know what to say. Like, this is like shocking to me, but not shocking. And I'm just like, oh my God. Wow. That's where actually, I think I know what we should start with, though. This is a good one. Okay. So obviously we're just like, I just realized that people often like news is often just like repeat like complete lies, like just like over and over, because they expect it's about the quantity, not the quality. Like even if you debunk each one, you're not going to debunk all of them because they're all, they just kind of want you to get the misinformation. So that's what I figure. But there's also, so to me, the biggest way that Lenin is relevant is that the Democratic Party is not at all unique. The Tsar set up a fake opposition called the Cadet was quote unquote a real opposition, but then they got taken over by capitalism. So they behave just the way every party that represents basically the financial capital behaves in the world. And people have this kind of unrealistic expectation of like making them behave, and the fact that like with the idea that they'll follow the rules or whatnot, and that's just not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, not that I have any better solution. But the thing is that it's like we kind of need. I guess people need to be aware of what to. I don't know. Like, what do you think about? I like it seems like I don't know what to say, actually, to be honest.
I think you're talking about power. And I think in a democracy, especially an American democracy, we expect our three branches of government to be a check on this kind of power. And we're finding out now that it isn't. And it leaves us speechless.
Yeah. That's exactly right. They're just, they just pile on top of each other is what I've noticed with the three branches. And yeah, I mean, it's like it would be nice if they were to step aside, but they don't step aside for power. They fight back and it'll get worse and worse. And so I guess a lot of Bernie folks were very heartbroken about the 2000 election and just didn't like, what do you make of it? Like, how did you feel about it? And like, what was your?
Well, so one of the things I'm realizing about the Bernie phenomena was how remarkable it was in terms of bringing people together and creating something that unified us.
Yeah,
and
you and me wouldn't have known each other without
Bernie. Right, and it's remarkable to me that what Bernie's talking about is not radical. It's
boring stuff.
Yeah. So the people who have been brought together are people from all across the spectrum who are now kind of looking around going, now I don't agree with that guy. I don't agree with that. So we're factionalizing a little bit, but I think that's to be expected because we don't have that focus that we did with Bernie.
I mean, yes, we don't have a focus. And like I said, what is to be done? And I'm like really tempted to have you read what is to be done. But then I know that you wanted to talk about unity. So how about this? Let's read about the constitutional marketplace, like what a constitutional delusion is. And then we'll talk about the fragmentation, the unity, the nonsense. And yeah, because I think often the problem is that like there's no shortage of data. Like we have a lot of data, but people just don't know what to do of that information, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Right? Okay. This is one of my favorite pieces because it a lot of Americans I don't know, they just don't understand that this is a system that was created and it's not created to be fair. And they don't understand how it was created, what it does and what it doesn't. And it doesn't have to be permanent either. And I love this piece because it shows you how kind of undemocratic Tsarist Russia is. But then it shows you what's even creepier is that we're even less democratic.
Oh, yeah.
So, so what happened is that so let me just quickly explain. This is from 1905, and the workers in Russia had lots of strikes. And after that, the Tsar finally had to capitulate, and then he created basically it was a fake Duma, which is like a fake assembly that was only advisory. And the person who helped him write it, his name is Bulagin. He is some sort of like warlord, maybe. He's like an aristocratic warlord, and he writes a constitution that's like total nonsense. And Lenin is making fun of that. So with that, go right ahead.
All right. So I'm going to start right at the top, the constitutional marketplace.
Yeah.
And let me move this over a little bit. Bulagin, is that it? Bulagin?
Sure. Okay, let me look up his Russian name because I'm really bad with transliteration, but now that I can read a Russian, I love my Russian class because, like sometimes you get, it's Alexander Bulagin. Yep, it's Bulagin.
Bulagin. Okay. Bulagin, as the St. Petersburg aristocratic circles justly remark, is now playing for time. he is trying to postpone the reforms promised by the Tsar as long as possible and to reduce them to trifles that will in no way diminish the power of the autocratic Tsar and of autocratic officialdom. In place of a constitution, he is preparing, as we have pointed out once before in Verperyard, a consultative body enjoying no rights whatsoever. We have confirmation of what we said, namely the text of Bullegin's project published in the German liberal newspaper Vossische Zeitung.
I don't know. Okay, so let me figure out what that means. Okay, go ahead.
It sounds like Voice of the Times or something.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. It is called the Voice of the Times. Okay, wow, you're good.
Latin. According to that newspaper, Bullegin, oh boy, Yermolov.
Okay, let me just finish this.
Sherbatov.
Okay, those are all the royals in his Sherbatov, Meshchersky, and Count Sheremetov, and Prince Ursov. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so these are all very fancy pants Russians that have power, have been mentioned as authors of the project, which in substance is as follows. And you can imagine, I guess, what these guys are going to come up with for the discussion, no more than that, and the drafting of all bills. Two bodies shall be set up: one, a state council, and two, a state assembly. Bills may be introduced by any member of the state council or by no fewer than 20 members of the assembly. Bills are discussed and passed by the assembly, after which they go to the council and finally to the Tsar for his approval. The Tsar decides the form in which the bills shall become law, or he vetoes them altogether.
Oh, okay. Wait, does this sound kind of familiar to you?
Yeah, right? Sounds like so much.
I know. Like they have two assemblies, and it's really, so it's kind of funny because here Lenin interprets this as like just having as non-democratic as like he just can't see the difference between this and just having the Tsar decide everything. But
thus, Bullegin constitution does not limit the autocratic regime at all, but merely introduces two exclusively consultative bodies, an upper house and a lower house, like parliament. The upper house or state council is to consist of 60 members elected by the assemblies of the nobles of 60
gubernias. That's like states in Tsarist Russia. So, so the upper house is going to be, so normal people are not going to elect, normal people are not going to be voting on you have to be like a member of the royal family or the Assembly of Nobles, which is like hereditary aristocracy, to pick one house. Like one house is exclusively reserved for the aristocracy. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah, the nobles or the lords.
Exactly.
And so he goes on, as well as members appointed by the Tsar from among the officials and officers. The total number of members is not to exceed 120. The term of office of the elected members is 3 years. The session of the council may be open to the public or closed at the discretion of the council. The lower house or state assembly, the rabble, is to consist of elective members only. Ministers and heads of departments may sit ex officio in both houses. Namely, 10 representatives from each of the 34 Zemstva.
Zemstva is like like in the 1860s, the Tsar had this like, it was like a local council that handled all the rural districts. So rural services like.
Oh, okay.
So so apparently like these are the 34 more rural gubernias, and they're going to have like 10. So 340. Okay. So they're going to have these 34. Okay. I have a map. So just look at this map. These are going to have 10 representatives each. Okay.
Out of the 120, I'm assuming. That sounds a little more. It sounds a little more representative than our Senate, actually.
No. The top is our Senate. This is like our lower house. it's kind of weird. Okay, it's kind of funny.
Okay. So 10 representatives from each of the 34 for the rural gubernias, 8 representatives from each of the 3 gubernias having rural institutions, but no institutions of the nobility, a total of 24.
Hold on. So this is very interesting because if a zemstvo has nobility, they get an extra 2 seats for themselves here because they don't have any nobility. They're getting 2 less seats.
So they just come right out and say it.
Yeah.
Okay. So 5 from each of the 3 Baltic gubernias, 30 from Siberia, 30 from the Caucasus, 15 from Central Asia and the Transcaspian region, 32 from Finland, 20 from the big cities, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Warsaw, Odessa, Lodz, Kyiv, Riga, Kharkov, 10 from the Greek Orthodox clergy, 1 each from the Catholics, Lutherans, Armenians, Mohammedans.
That's
Muslims and Jews. That makes a total of 643 members. This assembly is to elect an executive committee consisting of a chairman, 2 vice chairmen, and 15 members. Their term of office shall be 3 years. The executive committee is to be a permanent institution. The assembly is to meet only twice a year, February through March and October through November. The sessions may be open or closed at the direction of the assembly. During their term of office, the members of the assembly will enjoy personal immunity. Only Russian subjects not under 25 years of age with the ability to read and write Russian will be eligible.
Hold on. So let's just, to understand how exclusive this is, let's remember that the literacy rate at this point is about 12%. That means 82% of the population could not read because they were too poor to go to school. So this itself, like just having this literacy requirement ends up disenfranchising the majority. Like people don't realize this. It looks neutral here. It's like, and also, the life expectancy was 32. So 25 is a pretty...
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And they will receive a salary of 3,000 rubles a year. Elections shall be held as follows in each of the 34 Zemstov gubernias. 2 members will be elected by the Assembly of Nobles.
I already mentioned this. 2 members by nobles. Yes. Again.
2 members by nobles, 3 by the rural assembly, 1 from the towns through special electors, 3 from the peasants through special electors, 1 from the merchants also through electors.
By the way, electors are kind of a lot like the Electoral College, where basically if you are like a peasant back then was equivalent to like a slave or more or less. So they basically had to go and vote for an elector. And it's funny, it'll get further watered down and you'll see it's a lot like our Electoral College. But
wow. The deputies from the non-rural gubernias are to be elected on a similar basis. We shall not enumerate all these absurd bureaucratic and police institutions. To illustrate the proposed method of indirect election, we shall instance the procedure for the election of peasant representatives in the rural gubernias.
Hold on 1 second. A volast is like a county. So, sorry. A volast is like a township. An uyezd is like a county, and a gubernia is like a state. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
Every volast elects 3 electors. These meet at the uyezd center.
Yeah. So they're meeting at the county center. So every town elects 3 electors, and all these electors go to another conference at the county center. At
the county seat, what we have now at the county seat.
Exactly.
The marshal of the nobility presiding and choose 3 electors of the second degree. These electors meet at the gubernia capital, the gubernia marshal of the nobility presiding, and elect the 3 representatives of the peasantry who must themselves be peasants. Thus, the elections go through 3 stages! Exclamation point.
This is kind of like how the Democratic Party more or less nominates presidential candidates, right?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Okay. And, people don't realize that. People don't realize that everything we do is very indirect, especially when it comes to primaries. Mr. Bulligan does not work at all badly. He gets his salary from the Tsar for services rendered. His constitution, as the reader can see, is a downright travesty of popular representation. The power of the autocracy, as we have shown, is not in the least restricted. Both houses are purely consultative, while the Tsar alone has the power to decide. The whole thing is simply a fine promise never meant to be kept.
I like this one. We need to meme this. Janet, let's meme this. A whole thing is a fine promise. That's like everything the Democratic Party does.
Really? Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And then he explains this. In the first place, it is a representation specifically of the nobility of the landlords. The nobility has half the votes of the upper house and close to half of the lower house. Of the 10 representatives, let's skip that part. The participation of the peasants in the elections is ludicrously remote.
Correct.
The three-stage system of elections makes sure that the common people are thoroughly sifted out before they get to the assembly.
Correct.
Wow. That is very, very familiar.
Yes.
In the second place, one is struck by the complete exclusion of the workers. Representation in this sheep's parliament is based entirely on the social estate principle. There are no workers' estate, and there cannot be. In the case of the townsfolk and the merchants, the elections are so manipulated that only the industrial and commercial bourgeoisie filter through the various gradations of electors. And it is extremely illuminating to see how this bourgeoisie is pushed well into the background as compared with the nobility. With the Tsar's servants, it seems, do not much fear landlord liberalism. They are shrewd enough to perceive under this veneer of liberalism the profoundly conservative social nature of the wild gentleman. It would be serving and very useful to make Bulligan's constitution widely known amongst the workers and peasants. One can hardly show up more plainly the real aspirations and the class basis of the czarist power, which is supposed to stand above the classes. One could hardly conceive of better material for object lessons in universal, direct, and equal suffrage by secret ballot. It is interesting also to view this skimpy constitution of landlords and bureaucrats in the light of latest reports on the Russian political parties. Except for the extreme parties, the terrorists and the reactionaries, a certain English correspondent who evidently mixes in society and therefore does not see common people such as the workers. They count as three parties. Number one, the conservative or pan-Slavic party. Number two, the liberal or opportunist party. And three, the radical or very characteristic of constitutional party, which includes most of the rural people, professors, and students. And there's a question mark around students. Its program, universal suffrage by secret ballot.
So that's their entire manifesto, or like that. Like that's what they're. What do you call it? It's not manifesto. What's the American word for it? I keep forgetting.
Constitution.
No. Let's say a party. It's like, oh, if you elect us, we're going to do X, Y, Z. What is that?
Oh, platform.
Platform. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. That's their entire platform is to get universal suffrage by secret ballot.
Well, that's very clear. I mean, we explicitly do this. The conservatives are said to be meeting now in St. Petersburg. The liberals will meet at the beginning of May in Moscow, and the radicals at the same time in St. Petersburg. Government circles are said to regard universal suffrage by secret ballot as equivalent to, quote, the proclamation of the Republic, unquote.
Hold on. The Republic is a land without a king. So, yeah, obviously, if you let people vote on whether or not you can have a king, people are going to vote no.
Wow. The radicals are the most numerous of all the parties. Willigan's project is, to all appearances, the project of the Conservative Party, the project of the, you're going to have to.
Okay. Svoboda means freedom. Osvoboda means asvoboda. I'll actually have to ask my Russian teacher. Let me ask him, and then we'll put a little thing.
Okay.
It's also another constitutional party. Okay, got it.
Okay, the project of this constitutional party camp is very similar to the program of the radical or constitutional party. In reality, not at all radical, but poorly constitutional. Finally, the liberal or Shipov party probably wants a little more than is offered by Boland and a little less than is demanded by the constitutionalists. The marketplace is having a great day. The bargaining is brisk. The fine gentlemen of society are standing out for a high price and are the cunning gentlemen of the court. Everything points to the two of them knocking a bit off and then striking a bargain before the workers and peasants step in. I feel like that's really important because the fix is in before regular people even get to see what's going on. The government is playing a deep game. It threatens the conservatives with the liberals. It threatens the liberals with the constitutional radicals. It threatens the last named with the specter of the republic. Translated into the language of class interest, particularly of the chief interest, exploitation of the workers by the bourgeoisie, this game means, let us come to terms, my dear landlords and merchants. Let us divide the power peaceably in bonds of harmony before it is too late, before the real popular revolution sets in, before we have the rising of the whole proletariat and the whole peasantry who will not swallow skimpy constitutions, indirect elections, and any other bureaucratic rubbish. The class-conscious proletariat must have no illusions. The only pledge of Russia's real emancipation from the entire serf-holding absolutionist system lies in it alone, in the proletariat supported by the peasantry, in the armed uprising of the two, in their desperate struggle over the slogan of death or freedom.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the main difference is here in America, there are so many illusions that you can just vote out power.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's I think if people were more aware of how our elections on every level resemble that, it's shocking. I think people would find it shocking. It's not just on the presidential level.
Can you talk a little bit about that? That might be a fun thing to talk about.
Yeah, because so when you think about who gets support to run like in a city council race or a county commission race.
That's basically based on fundraising, right?
Yeah, but it's also the people who are encouraged to run are often people who have been identified by business interest. So it'll be a business owner, or it'll be somebody who has been, giving an Orlando example, someone who has been very active in HOAs, so they've gone to the HOAs, and generally it's a business owner who's going to go to HOAs and do business with them. Those are the people who get this ground level support. Insurgents have a really hard time. Insurgents can win if they're in these densely packed city districts. Yes. We just had a couple of real big wins in Lake Worth. I always want to say Fort Worth. They just turned over the whole city commission in Lake Worth, and then interestingly, as soon as all these progressives got on there, they immediately abandoned their number one promises, which is to not work so closely with developers. So there's an interesting thing that happens once rank and file people actually get into these city commission situations, you have this social, cultural thing that happens, and people fall in line really, really fast.
Oh yeah. When Crystal Ball came, she actually talked about this exact thing. She calls it Washington brain, but I guess it's also Florida brain. And yeah, so that's kind of like why what needs to happen is that these people, there needs to be like basically they need to be reined in and told exactly what to do by a popular body of people. Mm-hmm. And they should not be like, any deviation should be just like treated like that they're gone. Like it needs to be ruthless in the way it's like, or something, because the pressure is always like, oh, shall we try this little incremental thing? Like, it's so tempting, especially if they have a good heart. Like, the better the heart, like the more they're like tempted to just kind of fall over.
Well, and the people that I think, the people that I have observed doing the best at staying true to their values are people that I think they're older, so they wouldn't use this language necessarily, but they're people that I would kind of describe as being a little spectrumy. So I'm thinking of a couple of people in particular that come from engineering and come from hard sciences that have entered city councils and county commissions, and they tend not to be so easily swayed. And I think that one of the reasons why is that they're used to working in groups where dissent is embraced. You know, you can be right and you can be wrong, and it's not any kind of thing. But people who come from more social career backgrounds, say like teaching's a very social thing. The education system is very much a cultural thing. They're a little bit more easy to kind of pull along with the rest of the crowd, to get swept off with the tide. And kind of tying back into Alan Grayson, one of the reasons I think that he was very successful in staying true to his values is that he doesn't care what people think. You know, he's just sort of got that. And so we have designed, as that piece of reading also illustrates, we've designed a political system that is designed to fail as long as people are social creatures.
Yeah.
You know? You have to not be a super social creature to excel and to maintain your values.
Interesting. I didn't even think about it that way, but you're right. Because the minute you go into Washington, or I guess Florida too, you don't understand like how despicable the people are. So you're absolutely right. Anyone who's like even mildly social, and they just kind of you can like everything that their assumption, and of course dissent is stigmatized in like the worst way possible there. But you're like, for example, we were like, there is a congressional staffer, I can't remember which one, but basically, they just like, I remember calling, like, they voted for this like psychotic thing against Belarus because like, and I'm like, why are you supporting right wingers? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, because we've been like, essentially their answer was like, okay, we've been told to do so, and they hadn't had any even just like even basic Google search. So it's basically that any kind, like unless they really know about something, they're scared to oppose status quo, but then you'll never have somebody who really knows their stuff in that position. So yeah.
Right.
I'll never be in that position, or you won't ever be in that position where you're like, these people look kind of weird and feel weird. Let's just look them out, check them out. Like, if anyone who's like even slightly curious is not going to be in that position. So you're right. It is meant to weed out anyone who's actually socially responsible.
Right. Yeah. And so what's rewarded is people going with the flow and people going with, following the leader. And the leader, as that piece of reading exemplifies, the leader is usually a landlord or a noble, somebody who has
Nancy
Pelosi, people who have more capital, more social capital are generally people who have more capital.
Oh yeah, actually, historically, we did an interview a few years ago with Ryan Grimm, where you learned that the reason why Pelosi's there is because she was like really good at using her husband's hedge funds to fundraise for candidates. So
yeah,
and that's the worst way to have a leader of the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, she was known for being in the background and using that Rolodex to have parties and bring people over for fundraising, to twist arms. And, she's made she's carved out a whole career doing exactly that.
Yeah. And so anyone who can work their way in through the system, in my opinion, is usually problematic, to say the least.
Right.
Okay. So you were talking a little bit about the divide. What have you noticed, I guess, is it unique to Florida, or do you think it's a national thing? What is it that worries you about it?
So on the divide thing, and I'll start with Florida and see if that comports with nationally. But I know in Florida, you have people who work professionally with the party and also with NGOs that are associated with the party. NGOs are like SEIU, unions, New Florida Majority, Dream Defenders. Those are NGOs. And there's a lot of them. That's not exhaustive. So you have this professional group that the party, the Democratic Party, has basically handed over the operations that used to be at the party level, that used to be handled by precinct captains and people like that. They've been handed over to these professional groups. So when people come and canvass you're generally being canvassed by people who are being paid instead of it being your neighbors, which is what it was, organic, which was the way it was meant to be. So I think that part of the fracturing is that if you're not employed by these groups and you don't have that kind of social capital going into the party, then you're naturally going to feel like I'm not a part of this. And speaking as somebody who was employed in those spaces and part of the party at the same time, it's a necessary and not sufficient thing, because even if you're employed by those groups, you're still expected to toe the line and not criticize like bad Democrats, like people who are pro-life, or people who are pro-fossil fuels, or taking sugar money, or all of these things that are important to Floridians, like taking money from Disney and that type of thing. You're supposed to look the other way because it's in the party's interest to look the other way. So there's all this nobility.
So they're trying to train you to look, I never thought of it but that way, to look for the party's interest as opposed to people's interest.
Absolutely. And the party's interest is the interest of the nobility. Like, going back to that other piece is, we're supposed to set aside our interests as workers or women or whatever identity that you want to, work with. You're supposed to set that aside and serve the interests of capital and serve the interests of power. And it's very self-consciously serving the interests of power. Interesting.
I didn't think about it that way, but that's very, you're right. Okay. So they're basically trying to, I hate using this word because everyone uses it these days. Gaslight. Oh God, I hate. Okay. But it's basically trying to gaslight you into thinking that serving the party's interest will eventually trickle down into serving your interests, right?
That's exactly right. That is 100% right. And that's mean to you in the party.
Can you explain what are some of the things they've done to Alan Grayson? Because I remember it, but I know like personally on on a personal level about like what they did with Bernie Sanders and Mal Hyman, but I kind of vaguely remember, but I don't have the personal details of this, all the hit jobs and stuff.
Well, one thing that is real interesting is in 2018, he ran for Congress for his old congressional seat in District 9, which is now being held by Darren Soto, who is one of these people who came from the state legislature and in the state ledge was always voted with pro-life and voted with charter school people. You know, like he had like all the wrong votes. And interestingly, the NGOs and that whole group got behind him. And not only that, so did the group No Labels. And if you know anything about No Labels,
there's a what do you call it? The centrist caucus.
Yeah. Yep. I forget. There's the New Democrats and the Blue Democrats and the Problem Solvers, and I think they're the Problem Solver. There's a bunch of centrist caucuses in Congress. I think they're the Problem Solver caucus, and so Darren Soto is a member of all of those right wing caucuses. They dumped an insane amount of money as independent expenditures in that race. And so these groups that are supposed to be progressive were, towing the line of this No Labels thing. And then there was only two races that they got involved in 2018. It was this one, and it was Dan Crenshaw's race in Texas. So that tells you a little bit about the qualities people. Now the issue that they got attached to, and they sent out a lot of direct mail that was completely defamatory and not true, was that the Grayson had he actually had an unused friends and family fund. Alan's history is he's like one of these genius people that went to Harvard at 16 and did economics, and he came from a real poor background, and he made all his money by making some shrewd investments in Wall Street. And so his lawyer had him set up this friends and family fund, and it had just been sitting there doing nothing. When he ran in 2016, the chair of the Democratic Party in St. Lucia County, who had a crush on Patrick Murphy, there's no other way to say it. She filed an ethics complaint against Alan because of this Friends and Families Fund. And so that just kicked off all of this bullshit. And the ethics committee found nothing wrong and all of this stuff. And essentially, he's in the process now, I believe, of suing No Labels for defamation for all of that. All of this is just manufactured.
Okay, so the thing about it is that's really horrible is that, yes, they can defame you, but then you might get a judgment 5 years later, but at that time, it'll affect the election. You know what I mean?
And everybody does this. You see this every election season. There will be, wasn't something that I was, he has 5 kids.
Oh,
so wow. Things got really, really crazy. And he wasn't about to go out and attack the mother of his children because of what was going on while she was at that time attacking him. But then the other thing was that she had 6 law firms handling her side of the divorce, and they were we are pretty sure that they were paid for by his political opponent.
Wow.
We tried to get discovery. This is really crazy. We tried to get discovery on who was paying her legal fees. And on the day we were supposed to receive discovery on that, the lawyer committed suicide, shot himself in the head at his desk.
Oh God, that's very, I don't know what to say, but interesting.
So crazy. It's just crazy.
We need to kind of investigate what happened here.
I know, right? So anyway, there was just a lot of, crazy stuff going on with that. And I think that's to be expected when you have someone like Alan Grayson, who is super effective, super good at his job. Like he got in a Tea Party Congress, he was able to get 120 pieces of legislation passed, amendments and
wow.
bills. And he had the three big wins that were just amazing. The one with Social Security, the one with stopping the airstrikes in Syria. Wow. And then stopping the TPP. Now, these were things that he was able to do just from leadership, from using his bully pulpit, from organizing people on the ground and organizing people electronically. And people are freaking scared of that. The party is scared of that. They're going to come after him again, in other words, because he is super effective. He has something that the squad doesn't have. And that is he is a genius lawyer who knows how to write legislation, and he also knows how to play politics. So you get someone like that in there with the squad who's actually helping them get shit done. There could be no stopping them, honestly.
Well, yeah. The thing about the squad is that none of them are they're not voting as a block. They're not forming a code. I mean, there are 10,000 things, but they just don't know. I don't know if they don't know what to do or if they're who knows what's going on inside. But yeah, they just don't have those skills.
They don't have the skills. They don't have the
understanding of everything either of what is going on.
The core competency with using the rules in Congress.
Oh my God. Yes. You can literally stop so many things by just saying, hey, we're going to do a point of order on some BS thing that they just made up. Okay. And then it can obstruct. Yes. Obstructionism. They just don't know how to do it.
Right. And there's the other side of obstructionism is finding ways to get your stuff, in under the wire. So I mean, all of that is knowledge and practice that, young people and people who don't come from litigation and don't come from doing lawyering might not be as good at. Now, they can get better at it. They can definitely sharpen their skills or put people on staff who are sharks at using the rules and are sharks at writing legislation. But we don't see that now. And instead, what we're seeing is the squad refuse to use their power. They're refusing to vote as a bloc. And they're showing all of these concessions to the establishment. I just did a piece on AOC has started the Courage for Change PAC that was supposed to support. This was supposed to support new insurgents who weren't taking PAC money. They raised $100,000, and instead of giving it to people who are insurgents, they tried to give it to Connor Lamb and all of these. Oh my,
I remember that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yes, AOC ended up transferring lots of money to these silly Democrats who are
a ton of money to people who already had funding from the DCCC, who were already supported through fossil fuel PACs, who were funded through healthcare, insurance, and pharmaceutical PACs, and through military contractors. And so the only reason I think that she did that was to curry favor, was to position herself as I'm on your side, Nancy Pelosi. I'm not a threat.
but you cannot. That's the thing, is that they don't understand the entire fundamental class conflict. It's like, you know how Jesus says you can't. I forgot what did Jesus say?
The camel through the.
No. Something about you can't serve two masters.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure.
That's kind of like what they don't realize, is that you can't serve two. Like Jesus, like it's an old thing, and they don't understand that if you're like. The liberal idea is like, hey, let us all get along and be so beautiful and happy. But that's just not the way things work, because sometimes if you are on somebody's side, it's kind of like a game of tennis where you are an opponent of the other person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and neoliberalism traffics in the lie that you can serve two masters. Neoliberalism launders all of these military, pharmaceutical, and fossil fuel interests through identity. So you can have like a Green New Deal tote bag that was made in China with like slave labor or whatever, but feel really good about fighting the good fight for the Green New Deal, even though you're doing nothing for it.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about branding, and I don't know. They have this idea of like magical thinking, where they think like just because they wish something, it'll happen, and they don't realize that in order for the Green New Deal, we need to have so much public transportation infrastructure. We need to kind of relocate like cities into a better design. I don't know, like thousands. There are thousands of things that need to happen in the physical world that I guess they don't make the connection or don't care to make the connection for, right?
Right. Well, and there is a space, like there's a space for urbanism where neoliberals can be very comfortable, where what they're actually doing is we're going to make bike paths, as long as they're legislating on the level of we're going to make bike paths and we're going to have walking friendly cities and redo the zoning in neighborhoods so that you can have a store on the corner. As long as it's that, then they can kind of walk that line. But when you're on the level of a member of Congress, you're really expected to have more to adhere to a set of values that reflects your constituency.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like we don't have. Okay. So this is the thing, is that you have to be careful. Like, yes, okay. So AOC and all the other people were like, oh, we're going to take on the Democratic Party. But then well, this is the same exact debate that basically the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks kind of had. What was the thing was that the idea with Karl Marx was that he said, like, basically they noticed with capitalism, like when you have industrial mass production, people tend to move really close to in cities. Like the rural population empties out, everyone moves into a city. And what Karl Marx noticed was that if you let that go on for 50 years, 100, whatever, you'll have like 90% of the people in the cities and very few people in the rural areas. And when you have a lot of people in the cities, you can kind of band together and just like take control.
Right.
So that's what, but then Russia did not have that, because Russia was feudal, more or less. So they had about 2 million people in the cities and 100 million people like far, far, far apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have the 100 million people, well, Karl Marx's theory doesn't work because there are 100 million people. And so the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, they were like, okay, we cannot wait for another 50 or 100 years before life improves. Look at how the peasants are suffering now. They have hardly any food. Their life sucks for them. They're like imprisoned. Everything that's it's basically a lot like slave plantations in America. And the Mensheviks were like, well, we don't really think that the peasants are capable, or whatever they thought. And they wanted to just wait until capitalism emptied out the rural areas and they became urban. And then it's like, no, we can't wait. And that was where the split between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks happened. And the piece we're going to read is actually like a Menshevik newspaper that basically talks about, okay, a liquidator is somebody who's like waters down the way Lenin used liquidator, it's like, okay, let's say that you are the hero for like, you support Medicare for all. If you're a liquidator, maybe like after you go into power, you'll be like affordable access. So you're watering down your platform. Sorry, why do I keep saying manifesto? It's the Labor Party uses the word manifesto, but somehow it keeps coming into my head as opposed to platform.
It's a great word. Well, you know, like before, as you're talking about these two groups, I keep thinking of Thomas Frank and his work on populism at the turn of the century. So we had in the United States, we had an amazing populist movement that was rooted in the rural America that came out of these states that you know, like the blue wall states that now Democrats don't even know how to talk to anymore. And the reason is because we have made populism like a bad word, you know, like kind of going back to the Bernie thing is I think the Democratic Party, the nobility, you know, that the Democratic Party serves, they're threatened by the kind of populism that Bernie represented, and definitely the kind of populism that came out of turn of the century, farmland, and the Great
turn of the century. You mean 19th, 18th, no, 20th century or 21st century?
Oh, I keep forgetting that I just lived through a turn of the century, but like the 1800s to the 1900s.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like trying to,
I would love to see you do like a piece with Thomas Frank, because his work on this in that book.
Which book?
It's called The People, No, N-O, The People Know, which is, it's about our populist movement in rural America back in the turn of the century, 1900s, you know, right as red diaper babies were starting to become a thing, right? So this is what red diaper babies were kind of inheriting, was that tradition of populism, and it was instead of coming out of a densely populated city, it was coming out of loosely populated farmland, which is just amazing. It just kind of blows my mind that we had all of that. We had that infrastructure, and it was allowed to be
dismantled,
and a lot of it was dismantled through this bogus, this bogus anti-communism, you know, where we the populists and the progressives back then, we're looking at Russia, and we're looking at the advances that were being made there, and American propaganda made it verboten. Like, you couldn't talk about that, and it was literally criminalized, you know, so that you would lose your job, and you would lose, you know, everything, your position in society and everything, if you had any kind of real class consciousness.
Oh yeah, the class consciousness is so erased in that, like, I remember a few days ago somebody was talking about how his grandfather or cousin or somebody was a pilot in Korea, and he was like, I was fighting communists, and it's like, no, you were not. You were a barefooted peasant who could not read and who had no food. So it's like they used the word, like, yes, obviously, if you're poor and like you're enslaved by the Japanese, you are going to be a communist, and that you have the incentive to change the system, right?
Right.
But that is not the they made it into a brand identity, as opposed to this guy is like a really poor guy who's just some Korean farmer, and you are in his land killing him.
Right.
And that was like the kind of like cognitive. And I was just like, wait a minute. I maybe if Jenna can remember the tweet, I was just horrified that he tweeted this out. And it's like, no, we're not killing communists. We're killing this poor. And so it's kind of like they've separated the class consciousness. And what I noticed is that a lot of Americans don't understand how, like, because they've never had this level of depravity where people can't go to school because there are no schools. There's no running water. Half of the population is dying from cholera. Like, they just can't even imagine it in their heads on what it's like. So it was a way to abstract away from how miserable and how like America, the empire, was fighting a war against these people who were, I don't know, what were like, they were nobodies.
Well, you know what's funny? We started talking out. We started out talking about Florida and kind of what it's like growing up as a leftist in Florida, and I was brought up by my grandparents, and when I was 10, we moved to the beach. So they didn't have a lot of money for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of the reason was because of health problems. My grandfather had a heart attack when I was like 6. And he had to stop working. And so like the only money that we had coming in was he was also a drinker, which I also mentioned. My grandmother would squirrel away money and buy property to rent. So it was only because of that, after he had his heart attack, that we had any money to live on at all. So she took all of that and bought this teeny tiny little house in Satellite Beach. And in Satellite Beach, you've got these teeny tiny little neighborhoods that had these little 1,000 square foot houses that were all built on top of a military waste dump. South Patrick Shores and Sea Park. So, and all of these houses were super cheap. So all these people came down from Delaware and Rhode Island and Pennsylvania and just filled up these neighborhoods, all these working class people. Everybody else on the beach was super freaking rich, like lived in these mansions on the waterways, and like they would go places on boats, like go to your friend's house, get on a boat to go to your friend's house, like from one dock to another. It was, the class struggle was right in your face, like all the time, 100%. And the way that it played out is just so funny. The way it's very like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The way that it played out in high school was you were either a jock or a surfer, and the surfers were kids who smoked pot, essentially, and the jocks were all the kids who lived on the in the rich side of the beach, and nobody understood that class problem that was going on in class terms. They saw it in cultural terms, which made it so that, oh, well, we can just fight and make it a fight or make it a struggle that's cultural. When it was all class. It was 100% class.
Oh my God. That's exactly, what's his name? Steve Bannon's strategy, right? Changing class to culture.
Yeah, culture, politics is downstream from culture, is what he says, and Steve Bannon is an idiot in so many different ways, but he really, for that one thing, for understanding that our politics is downstream from culture, I think that's something that liberals and the left need to understand better.
Well, I have to say that. Yes, in America, it is, because you just don't see the kind of depravity in a third world country where it can be like, because people are kind of, relatively speaking, not in that level of depravity, you can change it to culture because it doesn't directly affect most of the voters and you disenfranchise all the ones it does. So yes, he's right. Oh, by the way, oh God, I'm debating on this one. Okay. Okay. Janet, cut this until we figure out what this debate is. Okay. So the thing is that Steve Bannon, like once they asked him who taught you about the strategy, and he said Lenin. But then the thing about it is that's really, and I want to show this to people to show that how, look, the psycho is reading Lenin and learning all the wrong lessons from Lenin.
Right. But
then I don't want people to use that to smear Lenin, because Lenin was like the opposite, like he was like the most awesome person, or top 2 of the most awesome people in the world ever. Right. So this is how, so I don't know what to do, but we'll think about this. And Janet, I'll let you decide whether or not to leave this. So yeah.
That's interesting. And the other thing that
what he did was, like, he read Lenin to understand what the class structures was. And then he crafted a strategy to overcome people's consciousness. Lenin did the opposite, right? Like
Right.
he explained to people everything that was wrong with the world that they couldn't see because they were just stuck inside a factory in Russia or whatnot.
What you're describing is that Bannon learned Lenin in order to hack Lenin
Yes.
for a right-wing purpose.
Yes.
Where so it wasn't just taking Lenin as it was hacking it. Now they were able to take Saul Alinsky, they were able to take some other thinkers and just straight up appropriate them because there's no class critique there.
I get it.
Yeah. They had to hack Lenin to make that work.
Well, okay. So obviously, yeah. So, okay. So this has always been a debate, and so we'll let Janet decide. But yeah, the thing is that like they try to obscure it into anything, like national lines. Like, for example, I was interviewing this guy. He's a good journalist, but he's kind of what's the right word? He's kind of a boomer mentality. He didn't really understand what he was doing, but his book is fantastic. It's about the Lenin plot, and the way he kind of mentioned how the U.S. was attacking Russia, and it's like no, America was fighting peasants without anything.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like this was in 1918, and it's the same exact thing. Where in Vietnam, it's always that, and
well, in Vietnam too, we were pilots in Vietnam and Cambodia were often flying heroin around. Like there was something that happened after mid-century where American foreign policy, which was already dark, got super freaking dark. It just got criminal. Again, going back to Parenti and the gangster state.
Yeah. Exactly. And no, but what I was saying is that the way they obscure it is like the minute you see the class thing, it just becomes so obvious. Like for me, it's like they don't even do a good job with propaganda. It's like, no. But the way they'll make sure that most people will never ask that question, like just like see them as, I don't know, Russian, Ukrainian, whatever country, Syrian, as opposed to, is this a Syrian peasant or is this like a Syrian?
Right. And or Yemen,
Yeah. God. That's the worst example.
Yep. And when I was in college, the example was Ethiopia. A friend of mine wrote you should look this up. There's a song called Ethiopian Jokes. So a friend of mine wrote this back in the 80s. And it was Ethiopian jokes used to be a thing about like, to joke about people who are skinny. And this guy was like good leftist. And he wrote this amazing song that was about rich kids sitting around smoking dope, telling Ethiopian jokes. And, just like really punctured how gross and people were about that at the time, and at a time when there was a lot of consciousness about war and foreign policy and disarmament and Reagan, but there wasn't a whole lot of class consciousness in the 80s. You really had to go looking for it. You had to go looking for classes in Marxism and, either in the sociology department or the philosophy department. This wasn't stuff that I could get in the political science department. They just didn't touch it.
Yeah, I mean, they still don't touch it. I mean,
right.
and what you notice is that with liberals, like you can't actually, if you go back, like with Lenin, you can read even if he wrote it 150 years ago, because he's actually telling the truth. With liberals, like if you were to read like something that a liberal wrote from 1910, it's unreadable. It's like racist garbage that you just can't handle. And that's where, so what you realize is all these institutions, like, especially the liberal arts education, is just meant to like, I don't know, teach people nonsense.
Yeah. And you really have to look for like what I had to do was identify the professors that I wanted to work with. And if that happened to be the philosophy department, so be it. Like that was how I chose what I was going to do. Is I wasn't going to sit through and do study with people that I hated, and that was a lot of what I experienced in college was people that were contemptible. at the professor level.
But yeah, and it's like they're often so wrong and they keep getting rewarded for being so wrong. It's like, that their mission is for misdirection.
Yep, exactly.
Well, now, okay. Well, oh boy. Okay, I don't know how to go back to the unity part, but we'll just, I guess we'll just, would you mind reading on, well, you're going to love this. This explains why it's okay. You need to be chill about like factions and stuff. And we're not really a faction because none of us have formed a party. And Twitter's, okay, sorry, I'm going on a rant, but let's go ahead and read that one. It'll kind of explain that it's okay to like cancel everyone.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's see. Borba is the name of the Menshevik journal. Okay.
Tell me again what Menshevik was.
The Mensheviks were the ones who wanted to wait until capitalism developed and the world wait 100 years or whatever to get rid of the Tsar. And
the Dems.
Yeah, basically. And Lenin was like, no, this is not good. We can't do that.
Okay. 3 issues. And let me just start at the top. This is Unity, dated April 12, 1914 by Sir Lenin. Not sir. That would be. He would not be that. He would be. Because he would reject all royal titles. Vladimir Lenin Ilyich or whatever. Vlad. Okay. 3 issues of the journal Borba, which declares itself to non-factional, have already appeared in St. Petersburg. The journal's main line is to advocate unity. Unity with whom? With the liquidators. The latest issue of Borba contains 2 articles in defense of unity with the liquidators. The first article is by the well-known liquidator Y. Lenin, the same Lenin who recently wrote one of the liquidationist journals. And they quote, the path of capitalist development will be cleared of absolutist survivals without any revolution. The immediate task is to imbue wide circles with the leading idea that in the coming period, the working class must organize not for revolution, not in anticipation of revolution.
Okay, so it's like I'm sorry.
So what are they even? That's okay. So where's the unity in that? Writing in Borba, the same liquidator now urges unity and proposes that it should take the form of federation. Federation implies agreement between organizations enjoying equal rights. Thus, in the manner of determining the tactics of the working class, Lenin proposes placing the will of the overwhelming majority of the workers who stand for the uncurtailed slogans on an equal footing with the will of negligible groups of liquidators whose views coincide more or less with the passage just quoted above. According to the subtle plan of the liquidator Lenin, the majority of the workers are to be deprived of the right to take any step until they obtain consent of the liquidators of Severnaria. Okay, I've got the first one.
Okay, hold on.
Severnaria.
Rabachaya Gazeta. So the Rabachaya Workers Gazette. Northern Workers Gazette.
Okay. Yeah, this sounds so familiar. This is the freaking Democrats, totally. The workers have rejected the liquidators, but now, according to the plan of the liquidator Lenin, the latter are to regain a leading position by means of federation. Thus, the federation proposed by Lenin is simply a new attempt to impose on the workers the will of the liquidators, whom the working class movement has rejected. The liquidators reason as follows. We were not allowed to come in by the door, so we will steal in by the window and call unity through federation that which is actually a violation of the will and the majority of the workers.
Exactly.
That's a really nice passage right there.
Okay, yes, we should meme this. Oh, Jenna already memed the first passage. She's so good. I'm going to text to her to meme this. This is like so good. Okay. Oopsie daisy, I did not text that. I texted the wrong thing. Okay. Now I'm texting the right thing. Okay, got it.
The editors of Borba disagree with Lenin. Federation, i.e., gradual agreement between the liquidators and the Marxists as equal parties, does not satisfy them. It is not an agreement with the liquidators they want, but a new amalgamation with them on the basis of common decisions on tactics, which means that the overwhelming majority of workers who have rallied to the tactical line of put pravdi must abandon their own decisions for the sake of the common tactics of the liquidators. Now we hear that all the time in the party. This
like Medicare for all. It's like you can't be a purity troll. It's like for you, you're like, hey, no other job are you not allowed to be like? Can a teacher just be like, okay, I'm just gonna lose 5 kindergartners today?
Yeah, right. No big deal. In the opinion of Borba's editors, the tactics developed by Borba sounds a little bit like Mother Jones right now.
Oh yeah.
In the opinion of Borba's editors, the tactics developed by the class-conscious workers, which have stood the test of experience of the whole movement during the past few years, must be set aside. Why? So as to make room for the tactical plans of the liquidators for views that have been condemned both by workers and by the whole course of events.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Democratic Party does the same thing where they try to act like they know more, and it's like, no, you don't. You're pretending to know more, but you don't, and you're just genuine. Like they don't actually have any data on what like polls. Like none of this is like all of their entire tactics is based on their feelies or what the donors want, right?
Yeah,
and they're like always trying to convince you don't know what you're doing, and you're like, no, I think I know what I'm doing, and there'll never be a poll because polls cost millions of dollars. So, and of course, their polls are always like, if you ask a weird question. Whatever, go on.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other. Yeah, right. Okay. Utter defiance of the will, the decisions and the views of the class-conscious workers is at the bottom of the idea of unity with liquidators, which the editors of Borba propose. The will of the workers has been clearly and definitely expressed. Anyone who has not taken leave of his senses can say exactly which tactics the overwhelming majority of workers sympathize with. But along comes the liquidator Lenin and says, the will of the majority of the workers is nothing to me. Let this majority get out of the way and agree that the will of a group of liquidators is equal to the will of the majority of the class-conscious workers. After the liquidator comes a conciliator from Borba who says the workers have devised definite tactics for themselves and are striving to he says the conciliator from Borba comes and says the workers have devised definite tactics for themselves and are striving to apply them. That means nothing at all. Let them abandon these tested tactics for the sake of common tactical decisions with the liquidators. It's super familiar. And the conciliators from Borba describe as unity this violation of the clearly expressed will of the majority of workers, a violation designed to secure equality for the liquidators. This, however, is not unity, but a flouting of unity, a flouting of the will of the workers. This is not what the Marxist workers mean by unity. There can be no unity, federal or other, with liberal labor politicians, with disruptors of the working class movement, with those who defy the will of the majority. There can and must be unity among all consistent Marxists, among all those who stand for the entire Marxist body and for the uncurtailed slogans, independently of the liquidators and apart from them. Unity is a thing and a great slogan.
Thing. He said unity is a great thing.
Oh, it's a great thing and a great slogan. But what the workers' cause needs is the unity of Marxists, not the unity between Marxists and opponents and distorters of Marxism.
Yep.
That's good. And we must ask everyone who talks about unity with whom? With the liquidators? If so, we have nothing to do with each other. But if it is a question of genuine Marxist utility, we shall say, ever since
genuine Marxist unity,
of genuine Marxist unity, ever since the Pravdist newspapers appeared, we have have been calling for the unity of all the forces of Marxism, the unity from below, for unity in all practical activities. No flirting with the liquidators, no diplomatic negotiations with groups of wreckers of the corporate body. Concentrate all efforts on rallying the Marxist workers around the Marxist slogans, around the entire Marxist body. The class consciousness or the class conscious workers will regard as a crime any attempt to impose upon them the will of the liquidators, and they will also regard as a crime the fragmentation of the forces of genuine Marxists. For the basis of unity is class discipline, recognition of the will of the majority, and concerted activities in the ranks of and in the step with the majority. We shall never tire of calling all the workers towards this unity, this discipline, and these concerted activities.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say, but except he's right.
I think that a lot of people on the left, like the vast majority of people on the left, are not clued in to these, to the way that this factionalism has worked historically, and definitely not clued into the way the factionalism is working right now vis-a-vis the history. Like when we talked earlier, like the last time we talked for my show, I mentioned something about humanities majors. And one of the things that I liked about humanities was you were forced to know the history and the culture and the art and the science and the economic shit that was all going on at the same time and pull it all together. I think that is so rare amongst people on the left. We barely have time to understand the economics of what we're doing right now in the moment. You know, like, and you know, like most people are working more than one jobs. We got hustles, we got kids, and we don't understand, you know, the ins and outs of this kind of factionalism, you know. And
it's worse. I mean, it's not quite factionalism, because what Americans don't know about the Trotskyites is that they actually did a lot of acts of terrorism that killed, like they literally derailed trains in the Soviet Union as a way of, like, they were one of the fifth column. So it's not as harmless as people think. Like it was very insidious.
That's my point. We don't, it's not part of our experience. It's not part of our vocabulary. And when it comes to what was going on in Russia, our school systems, like high school and even college,
they don't teach anything.
We never read this stuff. I don't think most people are aware of the broad strokes of what happened in Russia during the revolution.
They just hear I don't think yes, they don't, like, maybe they'll know Lenin, but that's about it, and maybe still like sometimes, but nothing else. They don't learn about the overthrow of the Tsar or the Bolshevik Revolution or anything. Oh, you just learn that the Russians are evil and you can't trust them. Right.
Or and Stalin is a name that just gets associated with dictators or Hitler or whatever.
It's kind of funny because that's only happens in the first world. I remember I was hanging out with somebody in New York City, and he's from Cameroon. And I had a book by Grover Furr about Stalin. He's like, oh yeah, we love Stalin in Cameroon. And he took it so it's like, there's a bifurcated two-way, there's a big divide between how the West sees him and how the rest of the world sees him.
Right. Well, and bourgeois college students in the United States, don't read Stalin, don't read Lenin, don't read Marx.
Extremely racist. I mean, if you read his book on Stalin, it's like basically he talks about how Stalin was an Asian person, and that's why it's just there's a lot of that's why Trotsky is not very popular in places like India and stuff, because he's really racist. And
I can imagine how that played out at the time, because in music and in different forms of culture, there was the exotification of what they called Orientalism. And so it showed up in opera, it showed up in art, it showed up in mass produced arts and crafts and stuff that the East was seen as alien or foreign, but embraced for its exotic nature, which is not
race, not but fetishized. Maybe
it's not meeting it. It's a fetishization or romanticization. It's not meeting it where it is, and which is we've struggled for a very long time, I think, to finally get to a place where we can have reasonable conversations about the shit that was going on back then, and the things that people just have embedded in our machine language in our brain. Like this is the whole thing with systemic racism is that we have racism that is embedded in the systems, and that's what we're starting to recognize. And if you start addressing the systemic problems with racism and sexism and all that stuff, then you start messing with people's money. That's when people start demanding equal wages. That's when people start saying, why do we have undocumented workers, who are, who we're allowed to pay so little that they can't live, so on and so forth.
We talked about that actually 2 weeks ago. Lenin actually explains how capitalism forces people, he shows you the pattern, and you'll see, if you just watch our episode with Josephine, and it's really cool. We talk about exactly how you get undocumented workers inside of America. Lenin actually spoke about that.
It's a thing. It's a deal that we are finally starting to. We're finally starting to recognize how those people are being used. How that has served the ruling class.
And it's funny because the woman I had, Josephine, she's in New Zealand, and you see the same exact phenomenon in New Zealand as in the U.S. It just looks a little different, but it's more or less the same thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what this is saying about unity is that there's one group that has created these artificial an illusion, an artificial structure for unity, and people can either go along with that or not go along with that. And I think that's very similar to what's going on in especially Twitter culture right now.
Well, I mean, it's eternally going on. It'll always go on. Unfortunately, I'm more concerned with the way it gets played out amongst the congressional representatives.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that, this is something that I think people miss as we do our thing on social media, and we're trying to get information, and we're trying to learn more about who we are and what our economic situations, what all that means. I think when I see people on Twitter arguing and stuff, what I try to look beyond the personalities and the people arguing, and I try to see social groupings of people trying to work shit out, and everybody is at a different part of development, and everybody has affinities towards different kinds of cultural cues, essentially.
Hold on. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, because what I noticed, at least with what happened with people we know that we will not mention and inflate their egos, is that one of like certain people were sucking up to power and some of us were fighting power. And it was just like what happened when. And the person sucking up to power was justifying it by saying the exact same stupid thing where you don't know what you're doing or we have to suck up to power. So I literally see it from, I guess they themselves might justify it in their minds, but mostly it's like has to do with like, are they sucking up to power? And then they'll just randomly figure out whatever reason to suck up to power.
Yeah.
But we should not mention this person's name because they should not be inflated.
Oh, for sure. But you can take that model and apply it across the board. So when I think of that model, I think of people like Scott Dworkin. I think of Brooklyn Dad. Okay. They've all blocked me. Okay, Brooklyn's dad is the one who works for a troll farm, a Democratic Party troll farm. Yeah, and a political action committee. And Dworkin is at Funder. He's a big, Democratic Party. He's a money guy. And so these people are, and going back to what I was talking about the NGOs and professional left in Florida, these people are playing a different game than we're playing.
What are they playing?
This is careerism. This is trying to get in the good graces of party people who have money. Mm-hmm. And the way that they're doing that is on our back.
How do they do
it is by kicking us in the teeth and saying, you're not, what was the most recent one that they said was, you're not based in reality or something.
Oh my God.
Based in reality.
As if they are. Come on.
As if. Yes, exactly. They're based in the reality that they're in a correspondence or agreement with the people with money, and everyone else is sort of saying, yeah, we're not getting paid to say that, so, or believe that stuff. So we don't believe it, or none of that works for us. So.
I see now. Okay, so there's actually a difference in perception in that because they're getting paid to believe it, they have to convince themselves.
That's right. And there's the promise of status. There's the promise of social status and the promise of advancement. It's interesting because this is the same dynamic that works in different kinds of fraud. My family has worked in legal settings in going after different kinds of fraud. And one of the things that you look for are people who they're not necessarily getting a check. They're not necessarily getting paid. They will involve themselves in a fraud just to get to sit at the cool kids' table. You know, it's just social. It's just social.
No, that's very interesting to kind of, oh my God, that's so interesting. Like, I don't know what to say, but my God. Yeah, you're right.
And it is a kind of fraud that is being perpetrated on the left when, with all of this, people call it sheepdogging or corralling or coddling. It might actually be a better way of looking at it. But, we have our interests and we are, trying to stand by our interests. And we are up against a group of people who are constantly finding ways to come to blows with us.
Yeah,
it's a fight.
It's really. I remember the most ridiculous one was like during the stupid. I don't care about force the vote, like whether it happens or not happens. Like it's like cool.
Force all the votes.
Sure, we'll do whatever you want. Like it doesn't matter in the long run. But it was funny. Like I kept on getting these like trolls that kept on like asking me for my opinion, and I'm like, I didn't want to participate in it. So yeah, but I saw that happening where it's like, go away. We don't care. Like, but yes, there was like, but it was like one little thing created such an overwhelming freak out that it's like, why are you guys hiring? Like, it felt like a paid op at least.
If it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And this is what was going on. Swear to God. It happened during inauguration. It happened during the transfer of power from Trump to Biden. And if you look at the transfer of power from a shitty Republican to a Democrat, whether it was Reagan to Clinton or Bush to Obama, they were elected under the promise of all of this progressive change. And immediately what they want to do is reach out in a bipartisan manner and make the donor class comfortable. Happy. So they were already making that maneuver. They were already moving in that direction. And what Force the Vote did was it masked this thing that already happened, is already in progress. So they can point to a group of people and say, you're whatever wreckers or whatever, they were, what were they calling us? I can't even remember, but it's such a stupid argument. It occurred to me to look under the hood and ask myself, are we really discussing a particular vote that had to do with Nancy Pelosi's chairmanship? Or are we actually talking about whether or not we're going to serve the interest of workers or the interest of donors?
Fight. Yeah. That makes so much sense.
As a proxy. Exactly. And they think that they can carry it on. And people, let me tell you, people are going to look awful stupid talking about Force the Vote in July. It's already June. Why it's so irrelevant. It doesn't even make any sense. So, they're going to make it about Jimmy Dore, or they're going to make it about podcasters, or they're going to make it about anything they possibly can. So it's a proxy fight. Exactly.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Like the outrageous overreaction, kind of makes sense. So once you explain it as a proxy fight, but yeah. And the thing is that it just shows you that, really what these, it's kind of funny. They were both arguing that the squad did not have any power. No, I remember this. It was really funny. Somebody was arguing with me that the squad did not have any power. And I was like, I agree with you. The only power that the squad has is that AOC has a huge Instagram account and she can use it to educate the public. Right?
And of course it would be Instagram.
Yeah. It's sure. Let it be her. That's what I said. And then suddenly they would change their tune because first they were trying to pretend that, I was like, okay, then she should totally use it just to educate the public and show what a scam Congress is. And then immediately they'd be stuck because, yeah, I agree that she probably does not have that much power, but what she does have is an Instagram account with 1 million followers. And
social and cultural.
She can educate 1 million people on how stupid the Congress is, right?
Right. And instead she's definitely not doing
conspiracy theories. God, it was really weird for me because she was talking about what was in other people's heads, while she, it's I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. I think that there was a great neutering, and the January 6th situation went a long way to feed into that neutering. I think when we saw Rashida Tlaib,
what'd she do?
Well, she cast her vote. They only needed one vote to reject the extra billions of dollars to the DC and Capitol Police, and she cast her vote as present, which we're made to think that had to do with AOC having felt threatened during the January 6th. Wait. Siege.
So hold on. Can you explain how the present vote happened again? Because I missed it. So I'm just looking it up for just a second. But can you go back? Okay. So first we had the DC, not the C, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to call it the siege, but whatever. January is okay. So the police. So then, when did they vote about the police?
This was, I think, just last week or a week and a half ago.
Okay. Can you explain how? Okay. So what was? Okay. Can you just explain what happened between?
Yeah.
And I'm paying attention. I'm just looking this up so I know what task next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not gonna look it up. I'm just gonna go by memory. It was a bill, and I want to say it was 1.9 billion. It was right up around. Yeah, it was in the B's, it was in the billions. And so this was extra money to give to the Capitol Police to more militarize and make more technically proficient, which is actually a giveaway to military contractors.
I found the vote now. Okay.
There you go.
So the measure was approved by a 213 to 212 vote.
And all they needed was one vote. All they needed was one of those people who voted present to vote it down, to vote no. And because it was giving more money to militarize the police, you had a lot of Republican votes that, Republicans are going to naturally vote for that. And the Democrats, because they're running to the right,
So basically, why would she vote present instead of no?
There was a week before that, there was a tearful, Rashida Tlaib gave a tearful House floor speech about feeling threatened during the siege or the insurrection or whatever you want to call it. And AOC was standing right next to her and kind of holding her as she was crying or whatever. And, I think what happened is, instead of using reason, instead of approaching this in a way like we expect people to, it would cool rationality and taking a step back, they just, were like, let's throw a couple $1 billion at the DC police because we felt threatened on 1/6. That's just essentially what happened. And these are the same people who have been running on defund the police and all of this Black Lives Matter stuff. So it's contradictory.
Well, what I noticed at least is that they hadn't been even running on anything that radical, but they've been getting stigmatized for just even that. And they instead of standing their ground, they're capitulating each time.
Yep. Oops. Yeah, definitely.
But oh my God, yeah. So apparently it looks like AOC, Jamal Bowman, and what's her name?
Rashida, AOC, and Jamal
voted present as opposed to no. And if any, oh my God, if I were a total conspiracy theorist, which I am, I would have said maybe this, all these, what people don't realize is that votes don't come to the floor unless Pelosi knows exactly how they vote on.
Right. Right. And when we assume that the squad isn't coordinated and they're not voting as a block, I think we need to re-examine that and ask ourselves. They might
not be coordinating with each other, but a vote is not going to come to a floor without Pelosi knowing exactly what. That's right. She has the right. She can. She unilaterally can pull any vote and not make. And she without Pelosi's consent, nothing is coming to the floor.
Right. There is always coordination on votes. It just depends on with who and
Exactly. So I don't know if the squad's coordinating with each. They probably are not, but Pelosi will not let. And the thing is, AOC has an Instagram account and she can show you oh, look, here's one where I said, we'll abolish capitalism. Oh my God, this bill got pigeonholed. Here's a bill that it says we're going to end the military. Oh, it got pigeonholed. Ironic. Oh my God, here's this bill written by Alec and it just fast tracked. That's all she can do with her Instagram account and she won't do that. Right.
Yeah. It's sad. And I hope that things improve with the people who we've already elected to do the hard work. And in the meantime, here we are out in in Orlando and all, at home where we belong and stuff. And we still need Congress to do things to make things better for us. Like we're getting ready to lose the unemployment insurance, the federal unemployment insurance that's $300 a week. People are being forced back to work as we've got new variants that are eluding the vaccine.
I've heard this scary fungus variant.
Oh yeah. The black fungus thing is horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And all of this is happening at a time when, they're looking to federally do a federal push for reopening in September. So we have June and July and August. We have 3 months before the shit's going to hit the fan, man. And I bet you anything in the next 3 months, we see a surge in these variants because they're eluding the vaccine.
Oh, wow. And I've heard that a lot of people are afraid to take the vaccine because they're afraid of getting a secret bill.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and people have gotten bills too.
They have?
Yeah. Yeah. There was, and people are getting bills for testing too. So it's.
Oh my, I did not know that. So basically, it's like, oh my God. Okay. Wow. That's unbelievable.
I did a whole runaround with the COVID test, right? Probably last year in May. And I wanted a test and they were like, well, you have insurance. So we have to put this through your insurance. And I'm like, no, I thought this was like a federal program thing. And they're like, well, it was because the entity, there were 6 different entities that you could choose from in where I live. And it was because that entity was associated with a for-profit healthcare group. They were like, well, we're going to try to profit. And I was like, screw you.
Oh,
I won't
wow.
do it. I'll just see if I get sick in a week.
That's crazy. I mean, wow. I don't know what I mean, it's like there's so much that's disorganized, like it's just falling apart, and even with the like that you can't hide anymore. And I don't know what, like I don't know how to, like I'm at a loss for words, actually.
Well, these are the contradictions that Marx talked about. These are all of the things that are coming to the fore, that something has to be done about. They're so difficult, and it puts people in such a bad position that something has to break. And I think you're going to see more people breaking to the left. You're going to see more people demanding more progressive change because our material conditions are demanding that right now. Material conditions have deteriorated so far that we don't have any further to go. Like, the government and the country has been running on the shoulders of the citizens and using us as ATM machines for too long. We're done. Our bank accounts are empty. There's nothing left, blood from a turnip kind of thing. So something's got to happen. Bernie was just the beginning. Bernie was just,
what I tell Americans is that basically they don't know anything about being in the left, and they should just like go learn from other countries. Is like
right.
That's right. Even right. England is an improvement, but I don't see like much happening without the world. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, our tradition, our leftist tradition, was pretty much excised, like we were left lobotomized during McCarthyism.
Exactly. That's a great way to say left lobotomized. Perfect way to explain it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. It was just removed from our brains during the 50s and the 60s. It started with McCarthyism and then all through the Cold War. That mentality was all through politics in the 80s. Like going back to the Contras, we were still fighting this like, oh, the Soviets are on the side of the Sandinistas.
But they were not on. That's the funny thing is that the Soviets were never. It was like literally in their imagination. They were nowhere to be seen ever. Like that was
it was all rhetoric. It was all designed to.
Like it's so funny because what you noticed is that in every war they were like the scare tactic was the Soviets, but the Soviets were nowhere to be seen in any of these wars.
Right. Right.
And then you realize that Americans were basically fighting the people.
100%.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, with the 80s, yeah. And it's like, I've always like wondered, like, like there's so much we don't hear about. Like, how many people did like the tough on crime laws actually kill? Like, we've seen some Black Lives Matter like videos that sparked the movement, but how many have, like, there's so many questions that will never be answered.
And we found out through the Black Lives Matter movement that people weren't keeping track of how many people were being killed from at the hands of police, for years and years, for decades.
They still aren't. Like, there are some newspapers that do it, but it's basically based on public reporting. So it's not so there are we don't know, actually.
Look at how uncool this is. Every newspaper in the United States, if you go to their website, they on the front page, like above the fold, so to speak, on the webpage, there's the fresh mug shots thing. It's like a plug-in, and you see it on every newspaper. And so these are poor people who have been arrested for public drunkenness or whatever, but you never see reporting on the actual police. Like, what are the police freaking doing? What is the system that we're paying for? How are they addressing the citizenry? There is no reflection on that at all. It's always look at these terrible poor people who look funny and have a very bad photograph here.
I know, it's like terrible. And for me, that is they just should. I don't think you should be able to do perp walks, or they should, people should be just anonymous unless they're convicted.
Yeah, of course.
And if it's a public interest, like those random robberies, no. I mean, so it's kind of like really, I don't know what to say other than, there's like, did you not, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter under my real name. So my screen name is right now. It's what is it right now? It's Brook Hines, disruptive but going for problematic. And I am at Nashville Brook on Twitter. And then at my bio, you can find my Substack and my podcast.
Yep. I really liked your article about the bot farm. That was really
Thank you.
So please check out her podcast. It's one of the really good, because she goes through, she doesn't ramble like me. She's very organized. So it's like, it's very informative and a good, it's great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and we need to have you back again, not too distant in the future.
Likewise.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks again. This was really fun.
Yeah.
You're on.
Well, welcome everyone. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Brook. It was very illuminating, and I loved it. And it's like, Brook is one of those people who really is on the ground and kind of gets everything in a practical, visceral way that I don't. So I like it. Anyways, let's get to the first question. Home asked, why is Trotsky so popular in Central and South America? Well, it's because he lived in Mexico for a while. But on top of that, when you understand when Trotsky was around, he was actually pushed by the William Hearst presses and all the other publicists as an alternative to real workers' freedom. So a lot of it is propaganda. His ideas are, in my opinion, are pretty, just not very good. But I didn't want to get into the Trotsky thing today, but I guess we have to. Somebody else asked another question. Ghani Abdul asked, dang, y'all remember when Vosh used Marx and Lenin to get people to unite with the Dem Party and vote for Biden? Oh my God, yes. Thank God Hakeem has a video, like Hakeem has a good video about why Vosh is wrong. He basically didn't read anything and just Googled a paragraph. And really, he doesn't understand. Oh God, yeah, he's just problematic. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. let's see. As Max Gunny again asked, as Max Blumenthal says, the U.S. national religion is anti-communism, which is why even to this day, if they ask you if you're a member of a commie party at any time of your life in your citizenship application, correct. So that's basically it. Chavez, okay. Raidster Nebulosa says Hugo Chavez stated that he was a Trotskyist at one time. Interesting is all I have to say. And every year when Maduro tweets out something about Trotsky on his birthday or something, there's like two kinds of trolls. There's like yeah, I don't know what to say other than weird. But yeah, and do we have any other questions? One news item, I guess. Joe Manchin is quote unquote being the obstructionist again, and he's playing his role perfectly. So don't be fooled by that. That's about it, actually. Anything else?
What is it? What is he playing the obstruction role on?
On the Voting Rights Act.
Oh, okay, all right.
So the new Voting Rights Act is supposed to be like more inclusive, and he's like he made some nonsense comment about it. And I mean, his comment is just like totally word salad. But the point is that he is like, what's the point of having a party if you guys can't? If the Democratic Party cannot have a party line? Let's see. And then there's also Peru's having its elections, and Pedro Castillo is a leftist candidate, and he's been endorsed by Evo Morales and Maduro. So I think he probably is a pretty decent guy. The other person is President Fujimori's failed daughter. So it's going to go on, I believe, till tonight. And if you have any friends in Peru, tell them to vote for Castillo. And yeah, and hopefully Peru's been actually very hard because there's never been. Oh, okay. Racer Nebulosa said Lula also endorsed Pedro Castillo. So if you have both Morales and Lula endorsing you, I would vote for that person. So I don't know what to say other than that. And next week we'll talk. How about this? Next week we'll talk a little bit about the Peruvian elections and all the propaganda we can expect to see. With that, I don't know what else to say. Is there anything else? I think that's about it. Like, Peru's having its elections, and we need to just watch out for the propaganda that they're going to plant, and it's going to suck. But that's about it. With that, I will bid you guys adieu. And please subscribe to our newsletter, our podcast. This week we are going to have... this week I'm hopefully going to get out my article on Bolivia because I got the latest FOIA, Freedom of Information, so hopefully we'll get that out. With that, follow us on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, whatever. Oh, and then we need about 900 more hours before we can monetize. Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, please donate. No, I don't know. Just
click on those.
Click on use the QR. We can have a Monday stream. Monday stream at 7:00. We can talk. Let's do that. We'll talk. Dimitri asked for a Monday stream. Yeah, we'll do a Monday stream for the Peruvian elections. That's actually a great idea. With that, so Monday at 7:00 Eastern, we'll have a Monday stream for Peru.